You're busy, I'm busy, but we all want to be smart and learn a lot of stuff. So let me save you a little bit of time by summarizing the 22 books that have changed my life. Starting with Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. It's not that you aren't creative, it's that you're just scared. Scared of sucking, scared of being unoriginal, or worse, scared that no one is going to care. In her book, Big Magic, Elizabeth Gilbert makes the case that every creative person feels these things. The difference, though, is that some people feel that fear and say, fuck it, because what they want to make feels so important that they can't imagine living any other way. Gilbert says that living a creative life means being both brave and constantly terrified at the same time. It means saying yes to inspiration whenever it shows up, even if it's inconvenient. She also reminds us that outcomes don't matter as much as we think. Whether someone loves your work or thinks it's trash, neither actually matters. Your job is to simply make something and make it as good as you possibly can. Their job is to decide if they like it or not, so don't mix the two up. So if you've been waiting for the right time to launch that YouTube channel or start a newsletter, stop waiting for permission. You don't need the perfect plan. All you need is to start. Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. Fantastic book. Anyone who is interested in business, you have to read this book. Everyone wants to build something great, but most people don't consider what they have to endure just to reach that success. In his best-selling memoir, Shoe Dog, Phil Knight tells the story of Nike's chaotic early years. For more than a decade, Nike grew faster than its bank account, teetering on the brink of collapse every single year. Even as the company began selling millions of shoes, Phil Knight recalls not having enough cash to pay its bills. He remembers spending much of that first decade scrambling for loans, dodging lawsuits, and even moonlighting as an accounting professor just to keep the early business afloat. At one point, he says in the book, hard work is critical, a good team is essential, brains and determination are invaluable, but luck may actually decide the outcome. Shoe Dog shows that success doesn't follow some polished, perfect plan. Mostly, it's just about not giving up when things get messy, crazy, or totally out of your control, which is like almost always. Check it out. Fantastic read. Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. David Goggins was 300 pounds, working a dead-end job, spraying for cockroaches, and afraid of his own shadow. Then he became a Navy SEAL, an ultramarathoner, and basically a human fucking Terminator. How? By discovering the most powerful truth about the human mind. It's a fucking liar. Can't Hurt Me is Goggins' autobiography, but what it really is a manual for mental warfare against yourself. His core message, when your mind tells you that you're done, you're only at 40% of your actual capacity. Think about that. When you hit the wall, when every fiber of your being is screaming to stop, you've still got 60% left in the tank. Your mind quits long before your body does. Goggins calls this the 40% rule, and he discovered it the hard way, through Hell Week, through running 100-mile races on broken feet, through becoming the only person to complete SEAL training, Army Ranger School, and Air Force Tactical Control training. But here is what makes this different from your typical push harder, try more inspirational bullshit. Goggins isn't naturally gifted. He had a learning disability. He was afraid of water. He was horribly out of shape. Everything he achieved, he earned through pure mental callousing. The book includes challenges at the end of each chapter, not suggestions, challenges, because Goggins doesn't want you to read about transformation. He wants you to go out and fucking live it. Fair warning, this book will make you feel like a pussy, but honestly, that's probably what you need. Mating in Captivity by Esther Perel. Conventional relationship wisdom tells us that all you need is love. But if that's true, why do so many couples end up like roommates in matching pajamas? In Mating in Captivity, Esther Perel cuts through the fairy tale fantasies that we've been sold to explain that love and desire are not necessarily the same thing. Instead, they are two forces on the same spectrum, pulling us in opposite directions. On one end, you have love, built on safety and stability. Desire, though, feeds on mystery and risk. A healthy relationship has a little bit of both. Most couples chase the closeness of love, thinking that the passion will follow. But the truth is that too much closeness can kill our sexual spark. To fix that, Perel reminds us that we need to stay curious, because relationships with both commitment and passion don't come from knowing everything about our partners. They thrive from remembering that we don't. So if you want to keep desire alive in your relationship, stop treating it like a question you've already answered. Treat it instead like a story that's still being written. The Courage to be Disliked. Your trauma doesn't hold you back, but clinging to it does. That's the central idea of The Courage to be Disliked by Ichiro Kishima and Fumitake Koga. God, I hope I got that right. It argues that your past doesn't define you, but your perspective on it does. The book unfolds as a conversation between a cynical student and a patient philosopher. The student insists life is unfair and that happiness is reserved only for people with good childhoods. But the philosopher pushes back on that. Drawing from the psychology of Alfred Adler, he argues that our suffering stems not from our past, but how we interpret our relationships with others. For example, you aren't anxious because of your upbringing. You're anxious because, consciously or not, you've decided it protects you from feeling failure, rejection, or taking responsibility. To break that cycle, the philosopher suggests practicing what Adler called the separation of tasks. Your job is to live by your values, not manage how others respond to them. Like recognizing that you're not responsible for making your parents proud or controlling how your partner reacts when you speak honestly. Having the courage to be disliked doesn't mean being an asshole. It just means giving up on the fantasy of living a perfect life while trying to please everyone. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Did Roman emperors ever have anxiety? Turns out, yes, they did. Meditations might be the most incredible book ever written for the simple reason that it is the direct thoughts of one of the most powerful people in human history. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius didn't write to inspire others, he wrote to survive his own struggles. And in the face of invasions, betrayal, and plagues, his advice to himself was actually quite simple. Focus on what you can control and ignore the rest. Why? Because thinking you can control external events is like trying to teach a cat how to fetch. It's frustrating for you and amusing for everyone else. For a book that was someone's personal journal 2,000 years ago, it's pretty good for helping you navigate a chaotic world today. And it's a reminder that life will always be unpredictable, even if you're a Roman emperor, which I know so many of you are. But just because your life's unpredictable doesn't mean your attitude, thoughts, and actions have to be. Principles by Ray Dalio. Ray Dalio built the world's largest hedge fund by doing something radical. He wrote down every single principle he learned from every single mistake. And after 40 years, he had an operating manual for life and for business. This book is that manual. Here's Dalio's core insight. Life is just a series of problems that produce principles. You fuck up, you extract the principle. You succeed, you extract the principle. Do this 1,000 times and you eventually become unstoppable. But principles aren't rules. Rules are rigid. Principles are adaptable. A rule says, don't ever lie. A principle says, radical transparency will build trust. But consider the second order consequences of brutal honesty. Dalio structures this into a life operating system. First, know what you want. Second, identify what's preventing you from getting it. Third, design a plan to overcome those obstacles. Fourth, execute like a machine. And fifth, reflect and refine your principles. The magic happens in step 5. Most people make the same mistakes repeatedly because they never extract the lesson. Dalio's approach turns every experience into education. Every failure becomes future success. His most controversial principle? Radical transparency. At his company, every meeting is recorded. Every employee can rate their boss. Every decision is challenged. Does this sound like hell to you? Well, it created a $150 billion company. The book includes hundreds of principles, but here's the meta principle. You need to write your own. Dalio's principles work for Dalio, your life needs yours. So stop wandering through life, hoping that shit just works out and build your own operating system, one principle at a time. The Burnout Society by Byung-Chul Han. In The Burnout Society, Byung-Chul Han explains that we used to live in a world organized around discipline. You stay in line, you follow the rules, you survive. But now it's all about achievement. Always doing more, always pursuing your best self, always winning. And not because we have to, but because we force ourselves to. It's what we get off on. Yet the tragic outcome is that we're always busy, always tired, and yet paradoxically, never done. Han points out that as hustle culture has taken over, mental disorders have skyrocketed. And that anxiety you feel, the constant stress, the waves of depression, those are actually the side effects of a subtle, ever-present achievement addiction. But it's not all doom and gloom. Han reminds us that in the end, you're still in control. So rather than stacking side hustles like you're collecting fucking Pokemon cards, he suggests slowing down, shutting out some noise, and learning how to be, well, bored and boring. It turns out that the cure to burnout isn't relaxation, but boredom. The Course of Love by Elaine de Bottom. Falling in love is easy, but staying in love, that's actually the hardest part. This is the central idea behind The Course of Love, a novel by the philosopher Elaine de Bottom. It's not a love story in the traditional sense. Rather, it's what happens after the love story ends and reality starts to sink in. We're introduced to Rabi and Kirsten, two 20-somethings living in Scotland who fall in love with each other fast. Eventually, they get married, buy a house, and have kids. But over time, the magic that they once felt for each other starts to fade. The sex becomes routine, while resentments stack up in silence. One day, Rabi cheats on Kirsten, not out of lust, but out of desperate attempt to feel the spark that their marriage had lost. When Kirsten finds out, she's crushed, but they still don't break up. Instead, through therapy, they start learning what love actually is in practice, navigating boredom, dealing with conflict and disappointment, and choosing to stay anyway. The course of love reminds us that there's no such thing as happily ever after. There's only choosing to love again and again and again, even when it's difficult and even when it hurts. The Trial by Franz Kafka. Have you ever felt trapped in a bullshit system that you don't totally understand? Kafka wrote the manual on that 100 years ago. An ordinary guy named Joseph K. wakes up one morning and finds that he's been accused of a crime. The problem is, nobody will tell him what that crime is. So when Joseph is then put on trial, you realize that this isn't a whodunit mystery, it's a, wait, what is happening? Type mystery. Every person he talks to and every official that he meets just leads to more confusion and more contradictions. And the more Joseph tries to fix it or figure out what's going on, the worse everything gets for him. See, Kafka wasn't writing a weird story for the sake of having a weird story. He was illustrating a profound point about modern society, that most of our lives are determined by these invisible, monolithic institutions and systems that we don't fully understand. And because we don't see or understand them, it can easily feel like we're stuck in some sort of bureaucratic limbo. This point is so characteristic of Kafka's work that it's even earned a name, Kafkaesque. So the next time that you're at the DMV and you have to wait in line to take a number so you can sit down and then get called to take another number so you can then wait in another line and then take another number, welcome to a Kafkaesque hell. Transcend by Scott Barry Kaufman. You know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that pyramid thing from Psych 101? Well, it turns out that we've been getting it wrong this whole time. Scott Barry Kaufman basically took Maslow's work, dusted it off, fact-checked it with modern science, and gave it a complete 21st century makeover in his book Transcend. Now, the first bombshell, Maslow never actually drew it as a pyramid, and that rigid hierarchy, total misinterpretation. Needs are not a ladder that you climb. They're more like vitamins. You need all of them all the time, but in different doses. Second revelation, Maslow's real work was way more nuanced and profound than what it was made out to be in textbooks. He talked about peak experiences, self-transcendence, and the paradox of self-actualization, that the more you focus on yourself, the less actualized you actually become. But here's where Kaufman goes to the next level. He integrates decades of research in positive psychology, neuroscience, and personality theory to create what he calls the new hierarchy of needs. Instead of a pyramid, imagine a sailboat. The whole represents security needs, safety, connection, and self-esteem. These keep you afloat. The sail represents growth needs, exploration, love, and purpose. These move you forward. And the twist, you can have a broken hull and still catch wind in your sails. You can be struggling with basic needs and still experience moments of transcendence. Growth isn't about fixing all of your problems first, it's about integrating all of the parts of yourself, the light and the shadow, into a coherent whole. Modern Maslow isn't about reaching the top, it's about becoming a whole, healthy person. Check it out.